Right, so Labour has ditched its plans to expand the rights of disabled people. But for what possible reason have they done that? Have they not suffered enough after 13 years of them being kicked around by the Tories and put through all manner of noxious assessments, which all too often take precious little notice of the medical professionals involved, and even more often are carried out by people with insufficient medical training? Do Labour not want to be better than that? Do they not want to stand for the rights of disabled people? How can this decision possibly be justified? As an unpaid carer myself, I'm absolutely raging at this nonsensical decision. I've got skin in the game here. So what gives? Why are Labour abandoning the disabled? Why has Keir Starmer broken yet another promise over this? Not that he ever seems capable of keeping his word, no matter what it is. Right, so Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer, right? We know this. Former human rights lawyer. Before he became Labour leader, when he was still campaigning for the job, he said, "Before I was elected as an MP, I was a human rights lawyer, and I spent a career championing human rights and the work of organisations, including the United Nations." Of course, we know subsequently that he said an awful lot of things when he was running to be Labour leader, not least 10 pledges that he's binned in their entirety, blaming the Tories, blaming Brexit, despite planning to stick with it, blaming the cost of living crisis, blaming high inflation and interest rates, all things that still remain within an incoming government's power to fix. Nonetheless, but he's selling the same snake oil now they've been selling us for years. However, this comment he'd made had stood up in relation to plans for disabled people. It had stood the test of time as far as Starmer goes ever since he became leader. Even as recently as last July, because Labour were insisting that a future Labour government were fully committed to incorporating into UK law the entirety of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UNCRPD. Now, this is quite a beefy document comprising some 50 separate articles, so it dwarfs the UN Convention on Human Rights, for example. But then disability is a very far-reaching issue. It affects many people in a multitude of different ways. But still, you'd think anything the UN came up with as a civilised member of the UN, as the UK supposedly are, as we all are, aren't we not? Such laws ought to be adopted, and perhaps it might surprise you to learn that they aren't all, and all the talk of taking back control and making our own laws and the such like that our politicians keep telling us, liars as they consistently are, because we have always had that power, yet shamefully for something such as treatment of the disabled, that is not the case. One notable example within the UN CRPD that is not enshrined in UK law, for example, is Article 19, which states, "Parties to the present convention recognise the equal rights of all persons with disabilities to live in the community with choices equal to others, and shall take effective and appropriate measures to facilitate full enjoyment by persons with disabilities of this right and their full inclusion and participation in the community, including by ensuring that A. Persons with disabilities have the opportunity to choose their place of residence and where and with whom they live on an equal basis with others and are not obliged to live in a particular living arrangement. B. Persons with disabilities have access to a range of in-home, residential and other community support services, including personal assistance necessary to support living and inclusion in the community and to prevent isolation or segregation from the community. And C. Community services and facilities for the general population are available on an equal basis to persons with disabilities and are responsible to their needs." All of that seems perfectly reasonable and logical adjustment, wouldn't it? While none of it is in UK law, unbelievably, although it can be cited to influence a decision at a court setting, for example. And perhaps this might clarify why so many disability news stories you might read about are ones where disabled campaigners or activists have had to go to court over something to get awarded something they need as a basic necessity. That's just one of 50 articles. Some we have got as part of our laws, but that's more by coincidence than design, and still more of them we do not. Rights for disabled people to access education, rights to have privacy, freedom from exploitation, freedom from having their homes forced into, rights to forming a committee on the rights of persons with disabilities, rights to participation in politics. The list goes on. I've attached it to the source material for this video on YouTube, so you can go and check out the entire thing and indeed ask yourself why such seemingly logical, sensible, basic rights, such as simple changes to disability legislation in this country, are now no longer on Labour's agenda for forming a new government. Enshrining all of this and protecting the rights of disabled people in the UK is a legislative change at the end of the day. It doesn't cost Labour anything to do this. It's not about money, this. So why axe the idea? Why do that? Why send a message to disabled people who already know the Tories don't care about them, but Labour don't care about them now either. Well, regular viewers will remember there was some substantial disagreement at the Labour Party National Policy Forum some months ago, where we had the spectacle of various invited trade unions boycotting dinner with Keith, and some such as Unite refusing to actually sign off on the final deal, the final compromises and options going forward to become Labour policy, because it wasn't so much an opportunity to shape future Labour Party policy, it was more the case that Labour turned up and said, sign this, we're not changing from it, and various trade unions saying, no chance, this stinks. There was no compromise, there was no debate, there was no negotiation. Labour went to its donors in effect and said, this is how it is, sign it. And several said no. Well, this apparently was one of the items that was basically being imposed. Still, we have no justification on why this was happening, though. And indeed, the MPF forum outcomes, we're only aware of how things went down on certain things via reports from those who went and were in attendance. We don't have eyes on the full MPF results, the outcome, the documentation and the policy options going forwards. We don't know how horrible in scale it all could be yet from Labour, because until we get to Labour conference next month and these things actually get debated there with members, though debate seems to be a bit of a stretch at this moment in time, we won't know what they accept and what they won't. And it's also important to remember that although conference is supposed to be sovereign in the Labour Party, Starmer has abused that fact to the nth degree, treating conference as only sovereign when it is actually sitting, and effectively ignoring anything decided at conference that he doesn't happen to like. So he's a guy who won't listen to his donors, won't listen to his members, will do as he likes whatever they say, and still expects them all, and you, to vote for him. That is who he has shown himself to be. So I don't brook with arguments of we need to vote for him to get the Tories out, because the danger signs are there here and now, if you do of what that will mean. So to my mind, it is my opinion that like his funders and like his members, he no longer thinks he has to listen to certain views to get elected. So why should he bother with the disabled either, whose votes he doesn't think he has to win either, but can expect anyway? I mean, maybe he's right. Maybe this whole vote Labour to get the Tories out mantra is so ingrained now that it's a foregone conclusion. But I won't be voting that way. Well, let's not forget here that the Labour Party has a bespoke disabled members section as well, Disability Labour, and they're fuming. A statement from Cathy Bowl, the current chair of Disability Labour, said the failure to make a pledge on the UN CRPD shows an inherent failure to commit to making things better in the UK for disabled people, and shows that the party isn't listening. If we don't get the UN CRPD enshrined in UK law, it leaves the door open to further discrimination against disabled people. And she's right, of course. Goodness knows, disabled people don't need to be told by me or anyone else how badly they've had it. And as an unpaid carer myself, my family have been on the receiving end of that abuse too. ESA assessments, PIP assessments, the mental torture that goes with that, being assessed by somebody you don't know, aren't sure what they're saying about you and what they're writing down. People you know that have been incentivised in the past to deny you the vital support you need. It stokes fear, it stokes anxiety, and Labour are basically saying, no, we aren't going to introduce measures to protect you from that under a future Labour government. Nice, isn't it? So why have they binned it? Well, for one, this pledge to enshrine the UN CRPD in UK law formed part of the Corbyn manifestos of 2017 and 2019. So from a purely petty perspective, and we know Starmer is a petty, small-minded little man, that could well be a reason enough for him. For another, we have to remember that his equally robotic sidekick in a future government will be the ruddy awful Rachel Reeves, she of the fiscal spending rules now, but she will forever be remembered for saying to a great many people who are on benefits or who are disabled and reliant on social security that she would be tougher on benefits than the Tories. And there's no escaping the fact that many disabled people do rely on that state to survive. Can they rely on Rachel Reeves, therefore, to look after them? She who has sought the blessing of George Osborne, of all people, the architect of austerity, the guy who imposed the benefit freezes and the harsher benefit sanctions, the guy whose actions led to people literally fucking dying, and this is who a future Labour Chancellor seeks advice and inspiration from. Is she responsible for bidding it, therefore? Osborne said just the other day on Twitter, we created the OBR 13 years ago so Chancellors couldn't any longer fiddle the numbers. A year ago we saw the fiasco when one tried to bypass it. These OBR reforms from Reeves are sensible, pragmatic improvements. If the Tories are smart, they'll adopt them. That's a Tory attacking Tory Liz Truss and her actions a year ago and praising Labour's Rachel Reeves' budget responsibility plans. Little wonder Starmer and Reeves are being nicknamed the new Cameron and Osborne, and that should be sending a horrible, terrifying message to disabled people. Do you think there's another reason they've taken this path? Are Starmer and Reeves the new Cameron and Osborne indeed? Do you expect things to be better under a Labour government, or more of the same, or worse than we've got now? Are you disabled? And if so, what do you make of Labour ditching this promise to you and Starmer and Reeves being called the next Cameron and Osborne? Tell me all about it in the comments below. Share your thoughts with me, do. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content up daily as ever. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where the Tories certainly know better than Labour on this. For once Labour break their promises once again, this time to disabled people, the Tories have embarked on yet another cultural war against them. Unable to stand on their record going into the next election as they are, they can only foment hate in order to win votes. And haven't disabled people suffered enough? And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.